when she's here. It is special for me because I realized in preparing to do this that when I wrote my first book in the 80s, it was called Stepmotherhood, How to Survive, and not much was written on the subject. And in a library in Princeton, New Jersey, in a card catalog, remember card catalogs, there was a book called Stepping by Nancy Thayer. I did not know her. I looked at that book, and what I really was impressed by, that there was this woman author doing her work and writing prolifically in Nantucket. I did not know her. Over the years, my husband and I have a house here, summer here, lived here year-round even, and I became acquainted with Nancy. So for me, that's a real full circle from admiring and having a real ideal of what it was to be an author and live here in Nantucket, to introducing her here today. The matter of things coming full circle is very apropos because Summer Love is about 4 individuals that when they're young, they come for summers in Nantucket and life is ahead of them, and they return for a reunion 26 years later. So that's the full circle piece there. In talking with Nancy, I asked her what she might not, in talking about the book, be able to say to her audience and writers. And she said she would always say, go for it, that you should be able to fulfill your dreams. I also asked her if in all of these books she's ever used herself as a character. She said no, she hadn't. But what I do find in reading some of these characters is that they have that same upbeat and optimistic spirit that she talks of. And to me, that's really the consummate work of a novelist. She does that very well. I introduce you to Nancy Thayer.
Hi, everybody, with real faces and no masks, and this is wonderful. You don't have any idea. I was part of the board of trustees of this library about 20 years ago, and I worked with the Friends of the Library. And then everything changes, as it does, and now there's a new board of trustees and a wonderful set of programs that I think Janet Forrest organizes after Amy, what was her last name? Jeunesse, yes. So it's wonderful to be back here. You're probably more people than I've seen for 2.5 years. And it's wonderful to see you. And I'm very proud to have been introduced by Cherie Burns, who did write a book called Stepmotherhood, but she also wrote Searching for Beauty, The Life of Millicent Rogers, the American heiress who taught the world about style. And she wrote, Diving for Starfish, which is about a special jewel that Claudette Colbert or people like that wore, and it's about the jewelry business. So she's nonfiction. You can just stay in nonfiction, Sherry, because she. And she also wrote The Great Hurricane of 1938. And I don't even know when we met, but we have a lot in common. As she said, Summer Love is my 35th book, and I want to talk about that a minute. And then I also want to talk about Stepping, because Stepping was my first book. Summer Love, the idea for it came about 3 years ago when I realized that our daughter Sam and her best friend Sarah had been friends in kindergarten, and then Sam and her husband and family came here for the summer, and Sarah and her husband and son came here for the summer. And here were these girls I had known when they were 5 years old, and then they had lived with us on the island during college so they could work and make money, which is what people are still doing if they can get housing. And I thought, I know what those girls, what they dreamt of becoming, of achieving when they graduated from college. And I didn't ask them, have you achieved what you wanted? But I thought about it, and they were both happy and loving the children and loving Nantucket. And they obviously had happy lives. So I thought about how Nantucket is a place where you come to be happy. It's not like going to the hospital. Which is what I did, by the way, and I was not drunk. I had a fall on Thursday night and landed, and here we go. But I was thinking about how we have achieved our dreams or not, and how my children have, and now their grandchildren are becoming teenagers, and all they want to do, the two older ones, is live on Nantucket with us year-round. That's not going to happen. Charlie, I can't open. Charlie, I'm sorry, I want some water and I can't open it. Do you want to see my hands? I hope you can.
Well, it's spilling all over.
Well, don't fall down.
It's easy to open, but impossible not to spill.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So while I was thinking about my grandchildren and what they want, and my children and what they've achieved, I thought about my own life. And I'm 78, and my dreams came true. I'm so fortunate, and I hope lightning doesn't strike me because I always wanted to write, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to share because this is special. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I wrote before Stepping was published. Stepping came out in 1980. And I don't talk about this very much, but one of the questions I've asked people is, when you were in your 20s, did you ever do anything foolish or wicked or wrong or crazy? Because we all have an idea that teenagers do things stupid, and they do. When I was 20, so I was almost an adult in Wichita, Kansas, I eloped with my psychology professor, who was 16 years older and twice divorced. And I became a stepmother, which was great because I really liked the girls. And we eventually had 2 children. And during that time, we traveled around and I taught freshman literature, but I was thinking about what I had published before my first novel, and I thought, oh, this is really funny. There's a theme here. 5 or 6 stories were published in college literary magazines or university literary magazines. And my first published short story was about my grandfather and his death. My second published short story was called The Moving On and Holding of Time, and it was about a woman who wants to leave her husband. And the second story that was published was called The Genius, and it was about a woman who hated her husband and mixed canned dog food into the stew that she served him for dinner. The third short story that was published was called Philip McPherson's Hens, and it was about a woman who leaves her husband. and the husband, what he does after she leaves is buy a lot of chickens. So it was kind of a wry story. And then I wrote a novel called A Faithful Woman, which was about a woman who leaves her husband. And I sent it to Julian Bach, who was a literary agent. I don't know if he's still with us. But he liked A Faithful Woman, but no publisher took it. So this goes to where I wrote Stepping, and the most miserable time in my life. Our children were 4 and 2. Josh was 4, Sammy was 2. My professor husband had a Fulbright to teach in Helsinki, Finland. They gave us an apartment to live in on an island called Kulosaari, in a building that was made out of cement blocks. It had no elevator. It had a really loud front door that was hard to open. And we lived on the 4th floor. And we arrived there in this apartment. This would be about 1977. There was no television. There was no radio. There was no record player. There were no games. There were no toys. And the Finns would not talk to us. I've heard that things have changed. That was 40 years ago. But back then, they would walk past me as if they didn't even know I existed. And it was a very, very hard time. It was winter. It was cold. I think I probably bought a few things, a few toys, but toys were really expensive in Finland then. We were and still are so spoiled in the United States with all the little stuff we can buy. And Josh, we finally enrolled him in what was called a Finnish Lastentarha, which was a Finnish-American kindergarten. And the idea was the Finnish children would learn English, and the American child or children would learn Finnish. And after 5 months when we left, the teacher told me that nobody had talked to Josh the entire 4 months because he was the only American. But he never told us. He never said, I have to go to this place and be all by myself. So I remember those dark, cold days. You all know the refrigerator in Europe is like this. And every day I had to take a little stroller and Sammy's hand and Josh's hand and go down 4 flights of stairs and walk to the grocery store and buy something to fix, to eat. And when it was afternoon, about 2 o'clock, I would put the children in the room they shared and say they had to take a nap. And also, I may not have mentioned, there were also no books in this small apartment. But I bought a notebook and a pen, and I started writing Stepping, which is the first novel that I've ever published. I started writing it, and I wrote for about 45 minutes every day. At one point, I thought, this is ridiculous. I'm just going to throw it away. And I'm so glad I didn't, because when we finally got back to the States, I finished the novel, I sent it to Julian, Doubleday bought it, and because it was about what is called a nonfiction handle, which was step parenting, people really bought it. I mean, a lot of people bought it. This was before Oprah, and this was even before Phil Donahue. People didn't really talk about being step-parents, and they didn't say, well, I like one stepchild, but I'm not so crazy about the other one. And because this was fiction, I got away with it. So I was very lucky, and I continued to be lucky because the year my book came out, which was 1980, was the year I got divorced. And so I had a lawyer and an agent, and it was really cool. So I took up smoking because I thought, I'm sophisticated now. And but I never could smoke. It just, that didn't last long. But it was wonderful to be with my children and to be able to write while they were in kindergarten. And then one day, about 5 years after my divorce, a friend invited me in November to come to Nantucket to meet her and see her place. So I went, and I met Charlie Walters, who's been my husband for 37 years, which is lucky for me. So during those 37 years, we have seen endless summers with our children going to the beach. We went to the beach. Often Charlie was in his music shop. We took the kids. My sister would come with her children. At first, everyone I ever knew wanted to come visit us and stay with us and go to the beach. So that happened, and then I stopped inviting people or accepting their offers to arrive. But when the kids were teenagers, 14, 15, 16, 17, they had a lot of friends who came to stay with us for the summer or for a few weeks. And Sarah was one of them, but Josh had a lot of friends too. And all I did for that, I guess there were about 4 of those summers, it seems that all I did was drive them to the beach with their beach towels, come home, do laundry, more beach towels, go buy a lot of food, come home, pick up the kids, they would come and eat everything, and that would be about 3 in the afternoon. So then I would have to come up with more food. And at first I really loved it. And then they went off to college, and when they came back, Sam and Sarah had a little basement. We gave them the basement apartment we have, and Sarah and Sam made a their own quarter board called Frog and Toad Abode, which was very cool. And I didn't have to cook for them, and they took care of themselves. And it's in the basement of our house. So we were aware, Charlie was especially aware, when a guy who rode a motorcycle and had a dragon tattoo on his back came to visit Sam, and she said, "Can't he spend the night? He's a friend." And we said no. And at some point, Charlie heard a window opening in the basement. So he was very helpful, and he took on the brunt of of being the bad cop, and I'm thankful to him for that. When I first started being published, Julian Bach was my literary agent, and I think he had gone to Groton and Yale. And he lived in New York, and he took me, these were the old days. Whenever I went into New York, he took me to the Four Seasons for a 3-martini lunch, which he drank. I had 1 martini, and I probably went to the hotel and took a nap. But he knew I had come from Wichita, Kansas, and Charlie came one evening and we went to dinner at Julian's, and he introduced me to everyone as, "This is my little girl from Tulsa." So he was a wonderful agent, and I was with him for a long time until he retired. And then I was with an agent where it didn't quite work. And then one day, someone suggested, I don't know if any of you knew Laura Simon, who lived here, and she was an author. She wrote a wonderful book called Letters to Mr. Jefferson, which were about her garden and his garden. But she kept saying, "You should talk to Meg Ruley, you should talk to Meg Ruley." So one day I talked to Meg Ruley, and she's been my agent for years and years. I can't remember how many. And the thing I sort of laugh about is that Meg grew up here. I think she had 4 or 5 sisters and a brother. Some of you must know one of her sisters because her sister, Joanne, works in the pharmacy, in Nantucket Pharmacy. And for a while, another one of her sisters, Julie, worked for Dr. Pearl. So I thought, they know everything about me. They know, which doesn't mean I think you all were talking about me, because you had other things to talk about. But it was very cool to have a literary agent, for one thing, who laughed at the same things I laugh at. And Meg has been a wonderful agent for me. And one of the things that she knew I secretly wanted, I guess because I'm from Kansas, was that I wanted one of my Christmas books made into a Hallmark movie. And that happened last year. Hallmark bought it, and they made it into a movie called Nantucket Noel, which is filmed in British Columbia. So, and I didn't have any. Once I signed the contract, I didn't have any recourse. I had dreams that they would come to Nantucket, but Hallmark shoots a lot of movies in British Columbia, so they have everything set up there. So that's another dream that came true. So when I was writing my book, Summer Love, I thought, I'm going to write about 4 people. It's going to be 2 women and 2 men, and they've just graduated from college. And you know that feeling where you think, now the world is yours, and you can get a job, and you can be in charge of your life. And so they were very optimistically coming to Nantucket to work in the summer. One person, the first person I thought of, was Ariel, who she's fictional, but maybe not. She's a beautiful, willowy blonde. And there are a lot of beautiful, willowy blondes on this island. And she's one of these people who just is lucky in life. Another person who came was a very charming, handsome, sort of Romeo guy named Nick. And what he wanted was to get really rich and buy a hotel, buy a chain of hotels. The other man was Wyatt Smith, who was from Columbia, Missouri. Columbia or Columbus, I should know. Thank you. Where his father worked for this geology department and had won a Nobel Prize because he discovered a new element in the Missouri caves, and it was named after him. And I made that all up, and nobody has written in to say, I've looked at the table of elements, and there is no Smithsonian. But if you're writing a novel, that's what you get to do. You can give somebody a Nobel Prize in science. So Wyatt's father, who had won the Nobel Prize and was a great geologist, wanted Wyatt to follow in his steps, as many parents do. They want their children to do what they did. And the fourth person who showed up is Sheila Murphy, who's from Ohio, beautiful red hair, very pretty girl, and very naive. And so when people ask me, who am I? Which character is me? They're all bits of me, because I was certainly naive, like Sheila is. Ariel, the willowy blonde, who has everything she wants, secretly wants to be a writer. And she comes to the island with notebooks and pens so that in her spare time she can write. And Nick wants to own hotels. And what Wyatt wants is not to work for his father. And 25 years later, Nick owns a hotel, and he invites them for a reunion. And there are 3 children there that belong to them. And so it starts again. The people who are about 47, 45 see each other, see if they've become prosperous, if they've fulfilled their dreams, and their children, who are now 22, one guy and 2 women who are 22, they're just starting the process of going after their dreams. And I had them do what all of our guests and mostly all of our children and grandchildren do when they first get to the island. I think it's what everybody does. They get off the boat, they go to the jetties, and they run in the water, and the water splashes everywhere, and there's sun, and there's all this space, and there's the future, and happiness, and warmth, and friendship. And I have felt every summer when we had guests, I'll say one more thing and then I'll stop. In April, our 14-year-old granddaughter, Adeline, came to visit for her birthday with her best friend, Clover. And when they came here, I took them right out to Surfside, and this was right after a storm. And this is always my favorite time on the island because the waves were just amazing and crashing and splashing. And these 2 14-year-old girls just went off running down the beach, and then they took hands, held hands, and went around. It's like, it's magic. And the night before they left, I drove them out to Nantucket to watch the sunset. And they got up at 5 o'clock the next morning to see the sun rise. And And I feel like that is summer. That's what summer love is about. And somebody back there is giving me minutes. 7 minutes. Do you have any questions? Yes. Oh, that's a good question, Jan. He asked Jan Jacoby, who has written 2 books about Lincoln for middle school that I'm buying and reading. I don't know if Jan does revising, but I certainly do. I do a lot of revising. I will go up and type, say, if I get 5 pages typed in the morning, I'm happy. And the next morning when I go up, I look at it and think, oh, this is awful, but I want this sentence or I want this character. So I do about 50 pages or 100 pages of revised manuscript that then I send to my editor, who basically changes everything, and then I revise some more. I do a lot of revising.
So your editor works with you?
Yes, she does. And I have worked with her for quite a while now, and I really like working with my editor because what she suggests is really good. It's what I should have been doing all along. So far I have not been miserable with my editor, and her name is Shauna Summers. I'm not making that up. Are there any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you. Oh, sorry.
Do you have anybody helping you with research? Or is it all from your heart and your head?
And Google.
Is there any intern, somebody that you have brought into the system?
So far, I use Google, or I call my son, who knows everything about computers. I haven't really, well, when I first got here, when I first moved here in 1984, I don't know if any of you were here in 1984, but the library was very different. There were card catalogs, and I would look things up from books and do my research that way. And one of my books has a ghost in it, and Blue Balliet had just written a book about Nantucket ghosts, because so many people on Nantucket think there's a ghost in their house. Now I do more research, but the problem with that is, for example, with Wyatt Smith, whose father is a geologist, I started looking up caves, and I'm fascinated by caves. So Wyatt Smith and his father spent a lot of time going into caves, and my editor said, Nancy, there are just too many caves in this manuscript. And she was right. These people were on Nantucket, and I got carried away. But I haven't had, I've had a virtual assistant. I still have, that's just weird. I've had 2 virtual assistants whom I've never met. One lives in Georgia, and the other one also lived in Georgia and then moved to New York. And they do a lot of posting. Oh my goodness, that's we'll have to have another meeting to talk about technology and writing, because it has changed, it's really changed the world for writers. So thank you all for, yes, Amy.
Nancy, I just had a question. You've written 35 books. How do you have like a list of your major plot points and characters and things for all the books? Do you remember it all so you don't repeat it with another book?
I should be better organized, but the thing is, again, technology. Everything's on the computer. So I can think, did I mention this in Island Sisters or Island Girls? And a few clicks, and I'll get to it, and I can type in Jared Coffenhouse, and all the manuscripts that have the J.C. House in it will pop up. Mostly it's the social media that drives me crazy, because there are more and more outlets that come along. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Facebook, and I love that because I meet so many people that way. But now there are, my virtual assistant wants me to join something called Linktree. I don't know if any of you have, oh, somebody back there knows about it. It's a wonderful tool, and it drives me mad. Okay, well, thank you for coming.